As we say, Ruto must go is the same thing that those guys were saying, Moses must go.
No, Eric.
But we're in the wilderness.
Eric,
we're heading towards Canaan.
Let me cut you there. Because really, to compare Ruto to Moses, I think really is blasphemy.
Watch out, Moses.
No.
You Kenyans.
No. To try and epitomize Ruto to Moses is blasphemy. Honestly.
Is it?
Just to revisit this Moses thing, it has really somewhat my head.
It's really bugging you, isn't it?
It's really bugging me.
Well, this is one for the books, ladies and gentlemen. Jimi Wanjigi is beside himself after Eric Latiff, the host of Spice in Kenya, says Ruto is likened to Moses in respects to the way that the Israelites turned against Moses is the same way that the Kenyans turned against Ruto. And you've got to see and hear the response that ended up bringing out of Jimi Wanjigi. I'm going to need everybody's opinion on this. Was he right? Was he wrong? Was he semi-right? Was he semi-wrong? Was he totally right or wrong? Or is there anything more than just a subjective truth? Or could it be what Jimi Wanjigi described it as? Downright blasphemy. So let's now just grab a drink. Please like and subscribe and join this One Love family that we have become and enjoy the show. And you got to watch us to the end because it is just... You'll see.
Jimi Wanjigi is our guest for the next hour. Good morning, Jimmy.
Good morning, Eric.
How you doing?
Glad to be back here.
We may be in the Sinai moment here.
Okay.
The people of Israel believed what Moses was telling them. Let's move out of here. This is slavery. We work for the house of the Pharaoh. We need to get out. And God has told us we can move to our own land and freedom and milk and honey. And then you go into the wilderness. And not because Moses has done whatever Moses has done. It's because the people have done what the people have done that God decides circle around you for 40 years like this. Right? Who do they turn against? Moses.
Eric Latiff, in my mind, as far as an interviewer, the way he pulls things out of people and asks those hard questions that sometimes I'm like, why are you asking that? How can you say that? But to see the way he says it in order to pull more out of a conversation and get more in depth of what the person he's interviewing is actually thinking, Eric Latiff is genius. He is one of the greatest of all time in this field. Let me know what you think.
But is it on looking back and seeing this is the hope that we have, and you embolden, you are actually the embodiment of the hope.
Yes.
And because we are not in Canaan yet,
It's your fault.
it is your fault. The people do not want to accept that it's because of their fault that they are not yet in Canaan. They look at their leader, that there's the reason they are not in Canaan. Maybe it's the same kind of thing that we are saying here. As we say, Ruto must go is the same thing that those guys were saying, Moses must go.
No, Eric.
But we're in the wilderness.
Eric,
we're heading towards Canaan.
Let me cut you there. Because really, to compare Ruto to Moses, I think really is blasphemy.
No, I'm comparing you to...
sincerity,
I'm comparing you to the Israelites. Watch out, Moses.
No.
It is you Kenyans.
No. To try and epitomize Ruto to Moses is blasphemy. Honestly.
Is it?
Please, absolutely. Moses did never began on the premise of a lie.
So here we are. We find ourselves in the beginning of this web that Eric Latiff has just woven around Ruto to make Ruto to seem to be a higher figure than what he should be. And to Jimi Wanjigi, it just doesn't cut it.
Never. His whole path was to lead the people to Canaan. And he walked the path. Even God helped him part the Red Sea. He did. But to you to sit back to equate that to William Samoei Ruto, I think it's very sad.
Then what happened?
No, the analogy here.
All right?
Then what happened?
So in Sinai, yes, they went round and round. And I like to look at it this way. Look at it in terms of milestones in our own lives.
Yes.
And here's where I need everybody's help on this. The way Eric Latiff compared Ruto to Moses. Is Jimi Wanjigi kind of correct? I mean, I kind of felt the same way Jimi Wanjigi did on this. Dude, what are you doing? You can't compare Ruto to Moses? Seriously. I mean, in my view, Moses ran from the Pharaoh. He brought the people away from Pharaoh. Ruto, on the other hand, ran to Pharaoh to get help from Pharaoh at a time when the people were just wanting help from above or from the Lord and listening to Moses, who was taking the people out of slavery. Rudo, to me, reminded me more of Pharaoh than Moses, because Pharaoh is the one who went after the slaves and wanted to kill them and throw them into the sea. Moses was leading the people to freedom and wanted to free the slaves. So where does Rudo fit in? I don't get it where he fits in looking like Moses, other than, in my view, Rudo appears to me to be more like Pharaoh or one of Pharaoh's helpers, you know? But there is one likeness I find Moses and Rudo having, a similarity that I see common in both of them, which is where Moses was never allowed by God to enter into the promised land because he was disobedient and unholy in a few things that God had asked him to do. So in that respect, I can kind of see a little bit of Rudo in Moses. I see a little bit of Moses in everybody with that respect, a little bit of disobedience and unholiness, I think. And if you go back into the Word of God, into the Bible, into Deuteronomy 32, verse 51, 52, God tells Moses why you didn't go into the promised land. And God said this, it's because you broke faith with me in the presence of the Israelites. And he tells them where you did it. And he said, you did not uphold my holiness among the Israelites. Therefore, you will see the land only from a distance. You will not enter the land I'm giving to the people of Israel. And God was true to that promise as he showed Moses the promised land, but he didn't let him enter. So in that respect, he kind of reminds me of Rudo, where Rudo wasn't faithful to the holiness of what God was doing.
So, Eric.
So we should focus on the journey.
Yes.
Not on Moses.
Not on Moses.
Not on the tablets.
No.
Not on creating our own gods.
The Joshuas are being born every day. Right. I've given you a list of those who have laid their lives for this path. We are not in Sinai.
No.
We are on our journey now.
Okay, so we saw the awkwardness there. It was a little bit awkward in the transforming that video that Eric was making for the interview. It was a little bit awkward because he kind of cut it off. The clip, the interview stops and like cuts into pieces at that point. Like they kind of stopped the segment, like they didn't want to show it. Okay, so they clip a part out. Then they clip another part out, so it kind of gets a little choppy. I'm going to show that to you because that's where it gets interesting. It gets choppy, and then he goes on to he changes the topic. He changes the subject completely. And another gentleman comes in on the other subject talking to Wanjigi, and Wanjigi still can't get that out of his mind, can't get that. He likened and equated Rudo to Moses, and he has a problem with it. So it's really interesting. Check it out.
For this path, we are not in Sinai. No. We are on our journey now.
But
on our journey
we're in
to
Sinai
Canaan.
on our journey. Jimi Wanjigi is our guest this morning. What are you again in Safina? You're a member of Safina.
I'm a member of Safina.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, we keep saying that and reminding everybody that. We're still looking at what happened in 2024 politically, economically in this country. Voices, alternative voices. Jimi Wanjigi has been one of those, and he's our guest.
Kenyans do not trust any politician right now to change this country. And as we finalize 2024 going to 2025, how do we look at the political space turning out to be in the future?
Thanks, Dennis. Just to revisit this Moses thing, it has really somewhat my head.
Good.
You know, Moses never traveled with thieves and abductors and murderers. So please let us get the right comparisons, Eric. That thing.
It's really bugging you.
It's really bugging me.
You know, Jimmy, the Gen Zs would tell you to sema ikutoke.
That thing.
But you know, Jim,
Anyway.
I think your point is well made. I will not blame it. I was going to say, with that crowd, and it had all the Israelites were in Egypt.
There must have been thieves and vagabonds who aligned themselves.
No, those were not his thieves and his abductors. All right? They were not his murderers. They were not. They were not the people that went and killed 60 people. So please.
The point you make is a valid one.
Yeah.
The point you make is a valid one. You see,
Then it's just remind me of a question. You know, there's a question to ask.
You know, it's like saying the devil and God. You know, this is a comparison. So, Imenitoka sasa.
Yes.
So, Dennis, will you remind me the question?
Kenyans right now do not trust any politician to change this country.
That was epic. Jimi Wanjigi was just flabbergasted. He couldn't get that out of his mind how Eric Latiff had reckoned, equated similarities between Moses and Rudo. And Jimi Wanjigi's like, what are you thinking? What are you saying? And Latiff is just there. What do you think? What do you think? I love that guy. I like him. I love them both. And there might be people out there who love Rudo and may feel, like-minded the way Latiff had explained about him. But I don't know. It's a tough example to make. So, and another thing I just wanted to say about Moses and Rudo was this. In Rudo, he reminds me more of Pharaoh because he was using the army, the military, the police to attack the Israelites who were trying to move away from the government, corrupt government, into a place of freedom and sovereignty. So that to me was like Moses was leading them away. He wasn't using the army against the people. He was taking the people away from the military and the army. And when you look at it in one respect, Moses was taking orders from God, where Rudo seems to be taking orders from Pharaoh, orders from Joe Biden or the IMF or Meg Whitman or those people in that area where it's kind of like I like to shy away from it as them being even close to being even wanting holiness. But Rudo was grabbing onto unholy alliance, whereas Moses was seeking the holy alliance for him and his people. And Rudo was implementing big taxes on people, and it's a form of bondage because borrowing money in God's eyes, it says the borrower becomes a slave to the lender. So he's literally trying to enslave people instead of free them, which is less taxes, less government in general. But let me know what you think. These are just my opinions. Please feel free to comment below. One of my favorite stories in the Bible is where they tell the story about when Jesus went up to the mountain in the Transfiguration, and he brought up Peter, James, and John up onto the top of the mountain with him. And God was talking to them, and Elijah and Moses appeared. And Peter, James, and John says, we should make a statue. We should make a memorial here of those of Jesus and Elijah and Moses. And God said, no, keep your eyes on Jesus. That's the one you want to look at. You don't want to look at these men. Keep your eyes focused on Jesus. And that's who, if anybody actually who I want to represent. I don't want to represent Moses. I don't want to represent Elijah. I want to represent Jesus to the best that I can. And please click that like and subscribe button, become part of this family. One love, and we will see you on the next one. Bye-bye.